Awesome. Thank you, Aaron. That actually would be very helpful. So appreciate that. I'm Brian Dorr. I am one of the coordinators for the Lake Champlain Basin Program out of Region 1. And, as I shared with you all at the last month's meeting, EPA has been directed by Congress to evaluate New EPIC's performance as the fiscal agent for the Lake Champlain Basin Program. The evaluation must address timeliness in starting and completing projects, cost effectiveness, and we've been directed to include stakeholder experience in that evaluation. So this discussion today is one of those stakeholder engagements that we're holding around the basin to hear your perspective and your experience to incorporate into that report. That report will be public. It's going to be submitted to Congress in July. We have a 180-day timeline from the day that the appropriations bill was signed. So I believe that was January 23rd. So 180 days from there. And really what we're looking for is to hear your direct experience with how the program's administered. Of course, specific examples are always very helpful. And, because this is a congressional report, I recognize that this is a public meeting, but just so everybody knows, it's a congressional report. So we're not seeking to name names per se in that report, unless there is something that is specific, in which case I'll get your permission before I do anything like that. So just a little bit of ground rules before we jump into it. And so, this first topic is really what I'm hoping to hear about to start the conversation. And I guess I would just kind of open it up to the floor at this point and just ask, what is your connection with the Basin Program? Why are you on the CAC, essentially? And how long have you worked with Basin Program funded projects? What would you describe your relationship to be like with the Basin Program in New EPIC? And we can talk about past improvement efforts and how that's affected your experience and what you've seen come out of those. For those of you who have been involved in some of those, maybe you'll have some more to say about that. But I guess I would just open it up just to start there.
I will warn folks, I did mute some folks. So if you thought you were unmuted and you're talking right now, you're probably muted. So just go ahead and unmute yourself again.
Hi, this is Alice. Can you guys hear me?
Can hear
All right, I'm happy to start. I've worked for the district for 9 years, and we've had a relationship with the Basin Program. I'm going to say the Basin Program because that's really our direct contact typically. Is that okay? And so it's been a really successful relationship for us. They've supported education programming, a buffer program that we have. We've done a stream study. We've been able to do a broad array of things, conservation directed. And I'm also the president of the Champlain Watershed Improvement Coalition of New York, and they've QUICNY, that's called QUICNY. And so they've also supported our stormwater trade show for several years now. I'd say it's a very good working relationship. And I guess we're just doing section 1. So that's what I have for that.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Alice. That's really, really good to hear. And nice to put a face with the name. I've seen quite a lot of your names on different types of like documents and proposals and things like that. So sometimes it's always nice to get out and actually meet some of the folks that are on the other side. So pleasure to have you.
I can go next. Some other folks? Yeah, I'll go next if that's okay. This is Jennifer Perry. And there's a number of ways. The first time I was engaged, we were in partnership with a grant recipient in Vermont, the Composting Association of Vermont. So that was our first experience with a grant through the Basin Program, and it was a good one. And plus, just fun to work with with Vermont. So I will put a shout out for a cross region collaboration. It's really powerful. From there, we received a grant to support farmers. We have a cohort of 10 farmers. We're implementing that grant at this point in time to help them optimize their composting processes for those of farmers that are actually composting, and for others who are not composting necessarily at this point in time, to help them get started with a mind of phosphorus loading in the basin. So with the theory that there are best practices to apply to the composting process, especially when you're processing bedded pack, that will help address phosphorus loading in a lot of different capacities. There's some technical nuances there. And then we also received a capacity expansion grant, which has been a game changer for myself. Just through the composting work that I do, a lot of work supporting farmers. We were able to bring a communication staff on board because I've never been able to really be able to flesh out all the I've been doing in the work in the field, but to have like the way to talk about it, like the metrics and things like that. It has been a huge help for me, and working with both Aaron and May Kate has been delightful, and Sue Hager in the very beginning. So yeah, I've had great experience.
Awesome.
I can jump in as well. I've worked with Basin Program grants since 2017, but a bit more directly now since 2023. And it's been great. I mean, everything that I've done has been within education, both large and small, and then the public waterfront, but communication, everything's been great. Granted, I'm doing a program that's been going on since the early 90s. And has been funded by the Basin Program since 2012. So we have had a very consistent, strong working relationship.
Great. Good to hear.
I can speak.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I can speak for the Adirondack Watershed Institute and just say that I've been here for about 8 years, and the Basin Program has been an absolutely critical funder of ours in my history here at Plossmus, and I know that it was before that as well. I think in any given time, I'm looking at my list right now, and we have somewhere between 10 and 15 grants, but they are within science, research, technical grants, education, large and small, CVNHP grants, and organizational capacity have all been either current or past grants that we have received, and I would absolutely put it as one of our most important funders, and very much appreciate that relationship.
Great.
So I can jump in too. I'm Jenny Patterson from the Lake Champlain Committee. While I am very new to Lake Champlain Committee, we have a long history of very, very closely working with the Basin Program, and the Basin Program funds many of our most important projects, including our cyanobacteria monitoring program, our CHAMP aquatic invasive species program. We've received many education outreach grants, organizational support grants, and we love working with the Basin Program. So I'm sure you've gotten much more input from my predecessor, but I'm particularly appreciative of the grant that we have for hiring a New York staffing person, just because I'm really trying to bring our work to the New York side. So I will say thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much to the Basin Program, and we love working with you.
Wonderful. Anyone else?
This is Jim Dawson. This is Jim Dawson. I was the New York co-chair of the Lake Champlain Committee when discussions had begun about having a Lake Champlain Basin program. Mm-hmm. And it was the Lake Champlain Committee, among others, that advocated with Senator Leahy to get the original grant to start the Basin program. And at that time, I resigned as chair, and I was also on a precursor to the current New York CAC, and I resigned from that CAC in order to be appointed to the management conference. And on the management conference, I chaired the Plan of Study Committee that wrote the original opportunities for action. And as part of that process, we were very much involved in deciding on the categories and allocation and distribution of the first grant funds. So my involvement has not been so much as a recipient as a person who, on the near side, scares up faculty at SUNY Plattsburgh and elsewhere to get grant applications in and apply for the money, and have been somewhat successful in twisting a few arms that have had what I think in hindsight have been turned out to be some very successful grants. Currently, Tim Myhook's work is a premier example of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. It's good to have you here, and I appreciate hearing the perspective from the early days. I've seen a lot of notes from a lot of your meetings back in the 90s, but it's good to hear about it firsthand. That's very interesting. Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else have any points on this first section here?
Yeah, I can just make one last comment on that. I've been involved with organizations that have been recipients of Basin Program grants for the better part of the last 20 years, and always found the staff to be outstanding to work with, very cooperative, and not just with the grants and the admin part of it, but also like boots on the ground. There were times when Basin Program staff came over and helped out with projects when we had things going on this side, on the New York side. So just outstanding relationship with the staff, always.
Great. Thanks, Walt. And I guess that's always an interesting question too. Thinking about kind of your connection here, it sounds like a lot of you are recipients, of funding that's come through the Basin Program. Wondering too that we have, well, I guess we have. I've been a big part of this as well, behind the scenes here, but thinking about how we do awards and the timing of things and kind of the logistics behind getting the money from EPA to the Basin Program and NWPIC to out to the subrecipients. We've put a lot of energy, I think, in the last couple of years into improvement efforts for contracting and for subawards and things like that. And I'm wondering, have any of you kind of seen that change, or have you had any experience with those improvement efforts? And maybe I'll just kind of leave that as a vague question for now.
My CAV partner, I can share. She said that she noticed radical improvements. So she had bridged, I think, a prior version and a later amended version, and she commented on how much better it was. So I can share that part.
Great. Okay, that's great. Did you have like a timeline or when you kind of when those improvements were noticed, if you would?
That grant was awarded, I think, a year and a half ago. And I think she was comparing that implementation to a grant that was received prior to that. I don't know the date on the one that she received earlier, though.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Sorry, I see as I'm trying to move my PDF around so I can see you all. It's also moving on your screen. I did not realize that. Great. So kind of thinking about our time here today, maybe I'll move on here to section 2 here. And without giving away too much, what a lot of the past improvement, as I said, was about how projects get started. And so some of the things, especially if you've been a recipient or if you've worked with recipients in the past, I'm wondering about, what your experience is like getting projects started. How predictable and transparent is the award to contract steps? How, do you know what's coming next and what you're expected to do, kind of what that timeline looks like? And then on timeline, what do you find is kind of your typical timeline? And then if you're getting awards from any other entities, if you can compare, or if you have notes kind of about what that looks like or differences, those are always good to hear. And then, to kind of bring it home, we worked on a lot on the timing of contracts and awards because we were, seeing some delays getting projects started. And so if you've had a delay, can you talk about what that impact was like? What did it do to the project, or was the project fine? What was your experience like in that way?
I can weigh in again. I don't mean to hog, but I actually have a story for this one. So it's like a composting, like a mitigation of phosphorus, that grant.
Yeah.
We were subject to a QAP, and that took about a year to get through that entire process. I will say that in the beginning, there were different players. There was a lot of confusion. I was getting feedback from different parties, and the feedback that I was getting was conflicting. So there was, and then I think somebody left. So there was a long period of time in the very beginning of the QAP process. The contracting part went very smoothly. But the QAP, because we also didn't technically fit, like, it's a tiny grant, and we didn't fit into the hole that it was trying to put us into. So we were having to customize language, and like it just wasn't a fit. And then from there, on my plate, I was taking a long time getting back to the reviewer. So that took a pretty good chunk of time. But then we got, again, this is, I got in with May Kate, and she was extraordinary. She was, let's set up a time, let's do a working meeting. So once we both kind of like wrapped our head around the scope of the whole QAP process, it went very quickly and very smoothly. But the technical requirement on that level, it did not match our grant at all. So other than that, the contracting went, like I said, and the second grant that we got, the communications grant, very smooth. I feel like the communication is clear. It's just me orienting myself, like, and reading through the documents, and like, these are the requirements, this is what it means, etc. So the other part of the question was, how did that affect our grant? I had to postpone in-field testing several months, which is fine. It's working out okay. But where I was hoping to be doing field tests in the fall, I'm compressing it all into a tiny window, which basically starts now. Like, I'm on my second farm tomorrow. So
Sure. Understandable. Any other recipients out there who kind of want to weigh in?
I would say one thing that I know that we've experienced in the past is that, some of these education grants, especially the small ones, the timelines are very quick. And if the grant, contract is not received, then we have to delay things that should be underway planning wise, when you need to get projects going. One of the big things that's different from some of the state grants that we get is that, we can't do anything or spend any money until we have the contract. Whereas some of our state grants, they give us a start date on the contract, but there's no guarantee of getting the money if we spend the money ahead of time. I mean, so that one little modification would probably save a lot of people a lot of heartache, not being able to start even working at all on the grant when they could do it at their own risk, because inevitably the contracts come through, but you can't get reimbursed for something that happens before that actually happens.
Yeah. I could see that would be a challenge.
Again, my experience is limited to basically a year and a little bit, but I do think I've seen improvement in the past year on that timing issue. I know that our cyanobacteria monitoring program is a really big piece of what the Lake Champlain Committee does, and that we have in the past had problems with getting the contract in place in time for us to fully prepare for the volunteers and for all of the outreach that we have to do. And this year we had the final contract on, I believe, February 2nd. Last year it was in April, and so it was a lot better this year. I think in the past we had experienced issues similar to what Jennifer was describing, with it taking a long time to get the co-op in place for projects and then having it be too late in the season to really start the project. But again, that has been better more recently in my experience.
Great. Great.
I also think that turnover's been a little quicker in the last year in just getting the contract back and work plans approved.
That's good. Glad to hear that.
I would agree with that, and I would also echo what Jen said. Our experience is that there definitely have been improvements on timing, I believe, and we really appreciate the transparency of dates and when everything can be expected, and we sort of plan our year around knowing these grants are this time and these grants are this time, and this is when we're going to hear, and all of that is awesome. We also have numerous grants, and I've only had the education grants, but we've had numerous grants that require a QAP, and that is the one thing that can be tremendously onerous and challenging. If it's something we've done before, then it's easier. If we have a new, like we do right now, a project where it's something that's a little bit new and different, it has been a relatively difficult process. So I don't know how that could be altered in any way. I know it's really critical, but that is the one piece that tends to be a hard lift.
Okay. Maybe we can pick on that QAP piece then a little bit here. I probably have to start by apologizing for the QAPs, because probably a lot of that requirement is probably from my end. But just to, maybe a little bit of a little bit more depth about so what were the issues with the QAP? Is it not understanding what you need in a QAP? Is it the timing, how long it takes to review and kind of go through, NWEPIC and EPA review? Is it that maybe you don't think your project's a good fit for what a QAP is asking you to do? Maybe a little bit trying to understand kind of where the issues with the QAP lies. Is it EPA regulations? Is it how the program's applying it? That type of perspective.
For us, it was definitely a misalignment between our organizational structure and the questions that it was asking. So for example, the quality, what is it called? The quality assurance officer? Is that the title?
Yeah.
We don't have anything like that. We are basically one person. We also got into a bit of a pickle where I was able to pick a person out that could play the role of quality assurance, but he was also the person we were doing some microscopy, so he was also the microscopist. So we then had to find somebody other than him to be doing quality assurance, and it was like, I don't know who that would be. So there was a lot of that. There's a lot of protocol development that we had to come up with out of the blue, because that was a requirement, but it didn't align with the way that we work, I guess. And also for us, this was a tiny grant. It's very impactful, but not a very large grant. So the amount of documentation that we were being asked to provide was just, again, it was the round hole green peg thing. It just wasn't. It was having to come up with language out of the blue to make it fit into something that it wasn't fitting, and it hurt my head.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. Did you feel like you understood what the QAP requirements were before you applied? Did you understand, did you know that you might need a QAP coming into some of these projects, or was that like a surprise once you had a contract?
It was definitely a surprise, but I can't tell you that was your fault. I definitely can miss details, especially in the beginning of the grants and with new programs. So I can't tell you if that was my fault or anybody's fault, so to speak. But I definitely didn't know that we were going to be needing to do it. I would have written and we ended up changing the scope of the grant to make it align a little bit better, because we were we were intending to show some sort of an impact, and so we dialed it back to say we're not trying to prove something. We're not trying to test A, do something, and then retest B to demonstrate a change. I definitely would have written the grant different from the beginning had I known what would have been involved in that. So
I see. Okay.
And
That's
in
good to know.
hindsight,
Very
the
helpful.
language is definitely there in your materials. It's just, again, it's a matter of it somehow just didn't trigger in my own brain.
Yeah, and using EPA terminology sometimes is a little
Yes.
interesting.
It's a little
Collecting
bit.
environmental information, as I think the QAP regulations say, doesn't always trigger, people to think, well, I'm not doing a monitoring program, so therefore, I'm not collecting it well. Our side is a little bit more specific sometimes about kind of where that need lies, but
Yeah.
I recognize that that's a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, I will say, Brian, that I think for the smaller organizations and the smaller dollar amounts, it's like an administrative burden that some of the smaller organizations don't have the capacity for.
I can see that. Okay.
And I don't know that there's any way around that. We're working within the regs, but I'm thinking, it's an extra burden.
Yeah. Yeah. It definitely is. They can be, I have written many QAPs, and it can be a big lift. And if you don't have the organizational structure to kind of, as you were talking about a few minutes ago, if you don't have the organizational structure that's in place to support that, that can be an additional challenge. Yeah. Okay. No, some food for thought here then too.
Hey, Brian, this is Sue Hager. So I had been with the Basin program working on Jennifer's grant that she was just speaking about regarding the QAP. And I think one of the things is that terminology, because in an education situation where you're talking about just learning about either a product or a process, people may use words like investigation or evaluation or things that in a standardized scientific lab situation or research situation means something completely different. And I think that's where at times is a hiccup, because if they're coming in with that language, those particular words automatically flag, oh, we've got to get a QAP in a lot of situations, even though that's not really what needs to happen. So I think that being able to find a way to not have that reactivity in order to flag that when people, all they're trying to do is educate, right? Not put forth scientific research.
I completely agree with what Sue just said. I think that's spot on. And Sue was great too, by the way. And Sue also said we set up meetings, but yeah, there were some changes. So I will say what worked well was when I received the template, there was highlighting that was coded. That was helpful. It was like, here's this color means this color means that. That I found helpful.
Great. Okay, that's great. Anything else about the pre-award, kind of getting projects started? Move on to when work starts. Okay. For this section, this is delivering the work. This is, kind of thinking about as a recipient, once you've had your contract signed. So your contract is now in effect and work is underway. Thinking about were your projects able to go on as planned? Were there things that popped up in the middle that were challenging to deal with? Kind of what got in the way there? And then, thinking about timeline is one thing. Were you able to, complete the work on the timeline you had originally proposed during your proposal? And any administrative delays or requirement changes that you experienced, or thinking about, well, maybe we'll sit there to start and think about your project specifically and your experience, and then maybe zoom out a little bit and think about kind of across the basin, the grants that you've observed. We'll start with ones that you have led.
Hi, this is Pete Hay. I would say, if you have a project manager that, is available and has time to help guide you through some of these issues, then things go real smooth and work really well. And for the most part, that's true, but there has been turnover in staff and somebody changes and they move the grant to somebody else, or it's sometimes the basin program staff are just overwhelmed with stuff and they don't always have enough time. But most of the time, they're pretty good.
Great. Okay. Anybody else? Once you're thinking about, once your project is started, how smooth did everything run? Specifically thinking about your interface with Back to the Basin program in New EPIC.
Great for me so far. Yeah, it's been fantastic. I think this is probably going to go into the admin part, but I do appreciate your reporting template. I don't get a panic attack when it comes to your reporting time for you guys, because I know it's not a super heavy lift. You ask like appropriate questions, and I appreciate the heads up reminders. So yeah, so far I'm having a blast. I get to be in the field with farmers, which is where I want to be. So
great. Anyone else?
I would just agree with that. I think the templates are really beneficial for the quarterly reports, and makes it so that when you're at the end of the final report, like, a good portion of what has already been needed for that has been completed. So that has all been great for me as well.
Awesome.
I would say the Basin program staff have been very supportive of me coming into a new role with a whole lot of projects that are Basin funded and trying to sort through where they are, and in some instances have no cost extensions that were needed, so that we could kind of map out how to get the work done during the transition. So that has been helpful to me.
We've had similar issues here and had to request no cost extensions because of just staff transitions, and appreciate the flexibility of the Basin program to be able to deal with those scenarios.
Yeah, we've also had delays, but I think mostly they were because of us, not because of the Basin program. I know there was a period when like the metric reporting was updated, and then you had to go back with the grants that you had already started a couple of years ago and sort of try to learn that process. But I get that that's, came from above. So it's something they had to deal with. And again, like everyone said, the grant managers having a person who is assigned to that grant and having them accessible is a huge win, and not always the case with other funding entities. So really having them help us work through any of those changes has been great.
One other question, and it's kind of a bullet in here. Thinking about the administrative terms that are on your contracts, are those clear to you? Do you understand, what is being required and asked of you? What you need to produce or report on? Are all those, like, you have your contract in front of you, project's underway. Were there any surprises along, about that, or you were set up, you knew exactly what you needed to do, and no surprises?
it was clear for us. Thumbs up.
Great.
Same.
Good. Okay. Okay. And then for those of you who have, either published, I don't know, maybe you haven't, maybe there isn't anybody here, but if you've published any work or given presentations or produced, a product that you were going to go on and share or give a speech about or something like that, what has been your experience using or producing the data that you have collected or monitored for, during your contract? Has there ever been an issue, or have you had support getting that information out and being, having it available? What's the timeline look like on that? Anything like, is there a process in place or anything like that to have those deliverables kind of approved? Okay. Maybe that isn't something that has been a hot button issue here.
Do you mean, are you referencing like we've had we had some branding questions? Is that kind of what you're talking about? Like there's we have a best management practices document that we drafted that we needed to be reviewed, and then B, we had questions about how to just to confirm that we were on track with the way to put the logo and the language in. Is that
sure
kind of it, or you mean more published? Like,
yeah, I'm thinking more
like a journal.
about, so you've collected data, or you have done a research study, and now you're going to go give a talk at a conference, or you're on publishing a paper about your work. Was there a review process?
Gotcha.
How did you go through that? What does that look like? What was your experience?
Okay.
So we did that. We did a stream study and worked with May Kate. So basically we asked her 1 million questions and she helped us through it. So it was a new experience for us, but I wouldn't say there were any hurdles that, I mean, she worked with us, and I guess we were in compliance with, so no issues, I guess.
Great. Some of you kind of say you have, projects with other funders or other agencies and that type of thing. I know it's really hard to compare one-to-one, but how is your experience working with Basin Program and NUEPICS, to get your project through to completion? Does that differ from some of your other sources? What does that look like? Pros and cons, comparing, contrasting.
So compared to like the DEC WQIP closeouts, they are so easy. These closeouts are more challenging. And I think one of the challenges for us that we're always trying to get better at is tasking properly and then having to keep funding confined to a task. Whereas on other grants, we just have a total for BMPs and a total for personnel. And it doesn't really matter when you use that. And so trying to task things out so that we can eventually get some money to use for the next task is really challenging. And then it makes it more challenging for us to meet the confining, numbers within the tasks. So I guess that's some of the, I guess it's more difficult through this process than it is through some of our other funding sources, where it's just one big lump and you don't have to go into tasks, and they give you 25% up front in the funding, and then you work through from there. Yeah.
You said you're mainly thinking of state funds from that?
Correct. So we have, grants through Ag and Markets where we can
Sure.
put in for the funding, and then also the DEC funding.
Okay.
That's always nice when you can get 25% up front or some amount up front.
Yeah.
I would say too about the amendments, like small amendments. I mean, a lot of the other grants are just much easier to move money in between, tasks. These, usually any amendments seem to require an act of Congress, so to speak.
And I
What,
will say
so,
that it does seem like the amendments and moving things between tasks or between categories, it seems like that's something that has gotten more complicated recently as opposed to getting more kind of improving recently. It's definitely, it seems like it's more complicated than it was, again, as compared to how it used to be.
okay. Is that, have steps changed, or is it expectations? Is it what's made it more challenging?
I think there's more formality in terms of what's required before things get moved between categories. Again, I'm new in this role, so I'm not sure how complicated it was before, but it seemed like it was possible to do more things more informally in the past.
Yeah, and one of the benefits of funding through this program is it's allowed us to do new programs. But especially when you're doing a new program, the predictability of the funding, you just don't know exactly when and where. So you're probably going to have to change it, especially when you're so strictly task based. So maybe we just build that into the process, is know we're going to have to take that time to make adjustments.
Yeah, and I'm just echoing Alice's observation on the task. That's very burdensome for us, and I also don't want a ton of tasks. So I was in this juggling act between limiting the number of deliverables that I had on my plate versus knowing both of my grants, probably 75% of my grant is not going to be billable until the grant is wrapped up, and that's definitely a burden for us as we try to cover our subcontract costs and hours and stuff like that. So
yeah, I think
Yeah.
maybe it's almost analogous to the co-op issue. We have one of the older grants that we're wrapping up where we're going in for a no cost amendment and we're moving certain costs out of the supplies line into the personnel line, because when the grant was originally proposed, the specificity of what we asked for in terms of supplies, it was limited to one thing and we didn't end up using that one thing. And so now we have to go through the process to move those funds. So we couldn't use it for different types of supplies.
Let's see. Would you all say that the administrative workload, if you will, is different for this type of award versus something you might get from a different funder?
I find it to, because of the quarterly report part, I'd say it's easier. I've got some funders, the reporting process is very detailed, and yeah. So I for me, it's on balance, it's easier.
What about others? So thinking about amendments, what does the process look like? Communications, all those types of things that go into how much time you're kind of spending on admin of your awards. Is it pretty comparable to other awards that you've had, or is it easier, harder? You spend more time here or less?
I would say somewhat comparable. And I say the WQIP is not that challenging, but I also feel like I'm just out here on my own with those grants. So having, even though maybe sometimes we have to go through a little bit more to do an amendment or something like that with the basic program, we have a lot of communication, a lot of support. So it kind of evens it out.
I agree with that. And just from the application to all of the reporting, a lot of what I apply for with my programs are smaller grants, maybe smaller foundations, but essentially the way that the application for the Basin program is laid out and the reports like sets at least me up to apply for all of those other grants as well. And just from a communication standpoint, I mean, when I reach out to someone at the Basin program, I'm usually hearing back that afternoon, if not the next day, depending on the timing. You don't always get that with, some of these foundation grants. It can be a little bit harder to nail someone down. So even a phone call, some of these places, it would be hard pressed to get someone on the phone, but someone's always answering at the Basin program and happy to walk you through whatever question you have. So comparable in the sense of like across the board, it's helping with these other grants, but definitely a little bit more work intensive, but helps on the back end with other grants as well.
Okay, good. And did just want to push on this, on some of the comments too, a little bit more about kind of the tasking of contracts and of your work plans, thinking about kind of what does the impact look like to you there? It sounds like, some of you have had to think pretty intentionally about how you're tasking work plans. So I'm wondering a little bit more about kind of what that looks like for you. Is there an impact to doing that? Does it change things for you for how you manage a project, or does it change perhaps like a financial impact in your office about how you're structuring out your plan for the year? I'm just kind of wondering where that kind of hits home for folks.
I manage several grants, so I have to juggle, which I guess puts me in a fortunate position. So because I know that this funding is coming toward the end of the grant, then I'm able to kind of schedule a more flexible grant where I will invoice that one more heavily in the beginning. But we have a number of subcontracts in our award, and so we're some of the subcontracts, their work doesn't wrap up until when the task is done, and the task is done at the end of the grant. So we're fronting those subcontractor payments as well in this time period. And I will make a comment because this was an issue. So because I have a subcontractor and we have to provide, he's over $1,000, we have to provide proof of payment, which is a cash check. We parsed out his payments. We basically just like split it in 12. But those payments aren't aligning with the task. So we had to do a little bit of internal maneuvering to be able to invoice accurately, which we were able to do, but it took some consultation and back and forth to get to that point.
Okay, interesting. Anyone else have anything to add kind of on the whole tasking of work plans?
Yeah, I think like others have said, we've tried to get better at arranging grants around what those tasks should be, but inevitably there's always the need to move things around that creates administrative burden because things happen on the fly and shifting the budget always happens, and it's just hard to plan around. So I would say that aspect of it, that task-based structure of it, is harder than some other granting entities.
All right. Any kind of final administrative points? Anything I missed? Kind of thinking about how you oversee your awards. Okay. And we'll go on to the next section here, thinking about comparing to other grant programs. And we kind of got into some of this a little bit, but I think maybe here I'm wondering a little bit more about where you've seen some uniqueness. When you see, maybe let's start at the top then. When you see a funding program that is very efficient, what do they do? Like, what are the hallmarks of that? What are some of the signs that you're seeing that makes them a very efficient, group to work with? Or some of the other things that I'm kind of wondering about, requirements of these awards. Are there requirements that are unique just to the Basin program, or things that we do differently that have an impact? Maybe let's start with those.
this is a silly thing, but SARE has big font.
Mm.
And I love it. It's just such a tiny little thing, but every time I do one of their proposals, the font size, things pop and are very like it just as you're processing all this information, it just makes it easier for my brain to categorize.
Anyone else?
I'm not sure if we deal with a funding source that's more efficient.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like I don't,
I do.
like I said,
Yeah.
they kind of compare, they all have their strengths and weaknesses, so it's hard to
Yeah. You know, and frankly, that in and of itself that is an answer, right? This is one of the more efficient ones you work. That's an answer. That's good to know. Okay. Well, it sounds like we've heard the task-based work plan is a challenge. Is that something that is unique to your experience here?
Unique meaning there aren't other like there are no other grant programs that have the same structure. Is that what you're saying? Asking? Sorry.
Yeah, I guess, I'm hearing a lot about how you're strategically kind of setting up tasks or, so that pay comes at certain points or kind of, on the flip side, some struggle with maybe like when when you can come in for those tasks for reimbursement because of how you're structuring them. Is that setup something you only see here?
So
Or is that something you experience other places?
tying the budget to the tasks, I think is the only, is the only place I've seen it. Like there are tasks and deliverables and maybe an outline of how you're going to proceed, but the money isn't put into those task categories and then held there.
Mhm.
Like it would just be supplies from start to finish, and you might get them as you need them, and personnel time from start to finish, but you use it as you need throughout.
I see. Okay.
Right. Same thing. State grants usually, if you have an expense and you paid for it, you can submit for reimbursement. It doesn't matter if the task is completely done or not. I mean, it may be a 3-year grant. The task isn't going to get completed to the end, or we didn't have to stage all these tasks in little segments in order to stretch the time out.
Okay.
And I've definitely worked with grants that do a retainage and I'm okay with that. Like that's kind of a security policy in terms of making sure like I guess there, I'd have a question back as to why it's structured that way. And I would assume it has something to do with, wanting to fund completed work. But a retainage is a degree of insurance policy, but also I think almost all of my grants I just have to demonstrate progress and we're going to get the same amount of money in the end no matter what that we invoice along the way demonstrating progress.
Which kind of leads me to my next question, just thinking about any of the terms and conditions or requirements that come along with your work plans. Is there anything there that you that either kind of jumps out at you that is different that maybe you weren't expecting to see, or oh gee, this is a great idea, I wish other programs did it this way? Are there contract or work plan requirements that are specific here?
So I know they ask that we have them review flyers and anything like that goes out, which doesn't necessarily happen with any other. It's not that much of a burden, and we haven't had an issue. It just makes us do it in an appropriate enough time ahead of time and stuff. But that's different than other sources.
Okay. Terms and conditions jump on at anybody? Um, this is always, I like asking this question too. If you were talking to somebody, a peer in your field, or somebody else in the basin, and they were looking for funding, would you suggest that they come to the basin program? And what would you tell them?
I just had this question recently, and my answer is like, yes, absolutely, because I know in my head that your project may or may not fit something that they care about. I appreciate about the basin program because it's all spelled out in the OFA and you know what the priorities are. But I also have said to that person, I will help you when you go through this the first time. It can seem onerous, but after you sort of understand the process, then it's easier and easier. So.
And I had somebody say those exact same things to me. And yeah, same thing.
Yeah, I do recommend people apply all the time. I think it's just a very well run program. It's very clear what the requirements are and the deadlines and so forth, and then the review process is very clear. And I've been involved in that at different levels and find that to be very, very efficient. I think that's unique to this program too. So yes, I would definitely tell a peer organization to go ahead and apply, especially it's so predictable when the funding is going to be available.
I definitely agree. One of the things I appreciate is just the clarity with which the funding opportunities kind of lay out the connections to the work of the basin program and, really look for projects that are distributed throughout the entire basin. And there may be organizations that aren't aware of it or aren't aware that they're eligible for it. And I think it's really important to get the word out.
I was just going to say the same thing. And I also like the framing of the scope of the work of like doing basin level work to me. I love, like, it's not like this county, it's like it reflects the region and the watershed and the water flow and like the actual environment more so than in the communities in the area. And it just sounds like, I love saying the basin, like I'm working in the basin, like it just makes me feel cool.
Yeah, like everyone else said, I would definitely recommend it. I think Lindsay mentioned, it sets you up for success. You think more clearly about your project. So even if you don't get it, you're set up for other applications or to really, hone in and do better next time. You can get feedback if you aren't successful with your first, and then you just learn about the process. I know one thing, the metrics have been pushed more, but in a way, it's sort of helpful to make sure that we are looking at, we're looking at metrics and looking what our, if we're making some actual achievements and impacts. So it's hard to complain about those. It's just something that you have to wrap your brain around and start thinking from that perspective. But yeah, definitely a 100%, definitely apply.
I completely agree. And I think I just got awarded one that is going to be like across the entire organization. And just from a project management perspective, the way the task table is set up, it is very beneficial when you're working across different channels within your own organization that maybe haven't worked in a basin program grant before or have minimal experience with it I mean, it's right there across the board, like in a table for them. So I think just from that perspective, it makes it easier to disseminate the information among the people that are required to get the project off the ground.
Great, good.
Brian, I'd like to make just one observation. As I'm looking at everybody that's participating today, everyone is kind of a big player in our region, right? LGA, LCC, all the soil and water conservation districts, they all have funding available so that they basically have some upfront money. When it comes to our smaller watershed groups or our new groups that really could use the help, or these type of grants could really be advantageous to them, they don't have that upfront money. So the way that the task and the payments are set up makes it really challenging for them. And I just thought I'd put that out there.
Thanks, Sue. Yeah, that's an important perspective. You're right. As I look around at the names here, I'm not seeing some of the smaller kind of, single digit size groups that I do see in some of the other places. But I think it's an important perspective to share here. I appreciate that. What about what I like this one. This is always I'd like to hear what we do well too, right? So what does New EPIC do very well in its fiscal agent role? Using the APA term there. So, as the host of the Basin program, what is New EPIC doing really well to help it run? Are there specific staff or systems or practices that you really value? In the Basin program, what are the really big pluses?
Make Kate, Sue, and Aaron for sure. I can say that's not even a question. That one-on-one, like, and being very patient with me too. I've never felt supported all along. But I want to, and I'm not quite sure how to frame this, but I at some point want to be able to mention this. I applied, I think, once and was not funded. And I honestly never really expected to get funded because I wasn't quite sure how the water quality world perceived compost efforts, but it was so I wanted to keep applying almost as a way, almost as an educational opportunity,
Sure.
because I do feel very strongly, and I believe science supports this in the role of soil health and how composting, especially on farm composting, can play a role in water quality. So was absolutely thrilled to get funded. So I would like to, I think that perhaps there's a interest in a capacity in outside the box, and that and maybe on some level you took a chance on us, and that might represent a willingness and an interest in out of the box, creative, new approaches to things. So I think that that's a sense I get, at least. So I also want to thank you for including us because we're very honored.
Good to have you.
I would say too, is like, the local staff, the people over at Grand Isle, the people we know and can talk to about questions and issues. And, New EPIC should, what they should continue to do is let those folks have their local identity. We all think about Lake Champlain Basin program. I know New EPIC is doing important work, so, behind the scenes, but the people we know are the Lake Champlain Basin program.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, Pete. I don't have much interaction with New EPIC. All of my interactions have always been with the Basin Program folks over in Grand Island throughout the watershed whenever they're out and about. So I don't know what the New EPIC staff's role is other than to move the money from the federal government to the locals. So I'm not really completely familiar with that aspect of it.
So we do
Okay.
have Myra, who is New EPIC. She uses New EPIC as her, where she says, and the Basin program. And having her over here, she supported us, the agricultural piece. And also, I guess one of the major strengths is that it's so regional. So it feels really like they know what's happening. And they've definitely given some attention to the New York side. So I feel like we're really a part of it, even though it's kind of based in Vermont. And they have a variety of grant categories, and they continue to adapt those and change them to meet the needs or what's happening. So, all around, my whole response is like super positive. And I think just even this, that we're here today, right? They're asking for our feedback. That's pretty awesome too.
Maybe I should have asked this question right at the beginning. Walt, you kind of bring in some clarity to this, and maybe we should have explained this at the forefront. Do you have a perception around, maybe around the basin, but maybe even just around this table, that the folks in Grand Isle are separate from the folks in Lowell, the New Epic folks? Or, so I guess where I'm going with that is to kind of make it clear, actually the folks in Grand Isle at the Basin program, who we're kind of, calling the Basin program staff, they are New Epic employees. So New Epic is actually the whole organization that's, staffing the folks that you're seeing and talking to in Grand Isle, and also the contracting arm, that is in Lowell, Massachusetts. So just wanted to make that point, just to be a little clear there.
So for me coming in, like, I had always heard of the Lake Champlain Basin program for years. And I worked in the environmental field in New Hampshire for years. So I had heard of New Epic. In that context, I was really confused for a long time about what New Epic had to do with the Basin program, because it really took me a long time, first of all, to figure out the relationship, and then also to understand exactly what New Epic does now and how its other programs relate. And I feel like it's something I'm still figuring out, maybe piece by piece, in terms of a few conversations I've had with New Epic staff around work that they do around public health and how it relates to the cyanobacteria monitoring program that we run. And so I do see them as distinct. Well, I guess I understand intellectually that they're connected.
I mean, we have 2 grant numbers, so that's confusing.
Which grant numbers are you thinking of? I'm wondering if one's mine, frankly.
The project code and the cost code, right?
Okay.
I think that's.
So there's often a federal award number that goes, I've seen also on some of the contracts too. So I have seen both EPA's tracking number, that's mine, and then, the New Epic tracking code on there as well. Just especially with programs that go, across different years, knowing where the money goes back to which award, which year of funding is something that EPA requires. So that might be what you're seeing. But 2 cross codes. Okay. And I guess maybe just to kind of bring this home, is there anything, we're always thinking about program improvement, process improvement. I think that's part of where this discussion came from and why Congress was, directing EPA to do this evaluation at this point. But as we do that, is there anything that you're like, Brian, don't touch this. Don't let New Epic change this. EPA, don't change this. Better, make sure you keep this aspect the same. Is there anything that really jumps to mind for you?
I guess this is more of a question for you, but would the timelines of funding change? Like, the education grants typically are end of October and, due by December, January. Like, would that change?
That could change.
Okay.
If you're talking about when money comes to the Basin program, that's all dependent on Congress.
No, I just mean
So
like the
I can't
actual
change that.
process of application. Like, would that major change happen?
Yeah.
Okay.
It wouldn't, and it doesn't necessarily have to, but that is something that, is, and I guess I won't speak for Eric and crew. But yeah, the schedule of when RFPs go out and kind of are considered across the year is something that's not set in stone, and it's not set in EPA regulations or grant policy or anything.
Okay.
Yep. And Brian, I can jump in on that one. And thanks, Lindsay, for your question. That the education outreach RFPs are set, have been set in the past to try and time the awards with an appropriate start date for most projects supported out of those RFPs, and also timed with all of the other RFPs that we publish, typically from or between mid to late August through December. As you know, we have I don't even know what our count is right now, but something around well over a dozen different grant opportunities that we offer each year, and they're all timed for various things and points along our budget process and award process cycle, and also time to not completely overwhelm our staff with volunteer reviewers. If there is a concern, I guess, with the timing of our outreach RFP that we publish, we'd be happy to hear about it and keep that in mind as we develop the schedule for this fall. Thanks.
Thanks, Eric.
So I don't think this is something that would ever change. Because I think it's inherent in the nature of the Lake Champlain Basin program. But the fact that it's a unified program, despite all of the different overlapping jurisdictions and the different regions of EPA, is really, really important. And I think from LCC's perspective, this is something that LCC has always existed to try and reconcile and operate within the entire basin. And I think that is really, really important.
Yeah, along those lines, I would say, knowing that NUIPIC is a larger umbrella and the Basin program is regional, like continuing their ability to provide the programming they do and to really focus on that regional level and give us the support that they give us and adapt to the needs and providing all those grant categories, like allowing them to continue forward in that way. Don't take that away.
Got it. I hear you loud and clear. Okay. Last question, and then I'll let you escape with the few minutes we have still here. And I just, is there anything that has been important to you about your experience with the Basin program or NUIPIC that I haven't asked about, and that you really want to make sure that either I hear or is a part of this congressional record?
I like this opportunity here. I don't know if they're ever like more than just like a kickoff of the grant group, but this is great. Like I'm so enjoying. Didn't really know who else was being funded and hearing about other people's projects. So maybe if there was like an optional midstream, like meet your cohort, I would get a lot out of that, I think. It's so thank you for this opportunity here. Is unique. I've had opportunities to feed back into grant programs, like send us an email, fill out this survey, like to be able to, my camera's broken, but otherwise I'd be looking you in the eye, Brian. And so thank you for listening and asking great questions. That means a lot. So thank you.
I appreciate you all being here and getting to hear your feedback as well. So it's important to us.
I'm trying to remember. I don't even know if it's true with the Basin program. If like when we sign a document that we don't, whatever it is, like we give you our insurance, or we give you, if that could just be across the board for everything we do, that would be helpful.
So like if you had like on record one time and didn't have to do it several times,
right? And if whether it's annually and it accounts for everything. I do like it that they've gone to the system for applying and that we can replicate an application and stuff. But I know I can't remember which funding sources where you're like, okay, I give them my insurance and then I give it to them again and I give it, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, I really like the online platform. I think that's been a game changer.
Great. Yeah, I will say it's changed my experience kind of reviewing all of your proposals as well. It's been very handy.
It is nice, and like Alice said, you can replicate an application to to fill in a lot of the blanks, but it doesn't fill in a lot of the important document blanks. Like if you do two applications at once, you've got to upload every single documents, this, identical document once again.
Sure. Okay. Anything else you want to make sure I hear before our time is up? Okay. Awesome. So I will drop, I'm going to do it right now. Drop my name and contact info into the chat here. Just if anything pops up, you're like, oh shoot, I wish Brian would have heard this, or the evaluation would be stronger if they knew this. Feel free to reach out. And I would expand that past this, program performance evaluation too. If there's anything else you want to talk about in the Basin program here or in the future, I'm all ears. And always happy to talk and hear about what you're doing or how we can help you. Other opportunities that are out there, partner programs, things like that. So always look forward to hearing from folks around the Basin. So don't be shy. Feel free to reach out. And yeah, I just, appreciate the opportunity to come and kind of steal your monthly CAC meeting this month and, knock off a couple of the requirements we have from Congress. And it's very helpful. And also it's just really nice to be able to spend some time with folks who are doing the work that, I see on paper, I see it come through in the funding. It's nice to hear you and get to know more about your actual experience though. So, valuable to me as well. So I appreciate that.
Good. Well, thanks, Brian. And we appreciate that you took the time to sit and listen to us and take the feedback. And feel free to use this forum in the future if you need it for anything like this, for a feedback session or a listening session or whatever we're calling this. I think it was very valuable. So yeah, by all means, feel free to coordinate with Erin or whoever her eventual successor is to step in and hang out with us again.
Awesome. I look forward to it.
And thank you all of the grantees for joining today. It's a larger group than we usually have, and it's great to see all your faces. Great to catch up with some of the folks that I haven't seen in a while. And Erin, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add. I don't know that we have time really for a full-on update session from everybody, but if anybody has anything that's really burning that's coming up very soon that they want to announce to us, please do so now. But I don't think we'll belabor that part of it. We're at a full 2:30 at this point.
I would ask Eric, since he's on the New England Regional Historical, is there an upcoming seminar, convention? I keep thinking it's in the spring, but I don't have a date.
So Tom, are you referring to the Heritage Summit that we host each year? Yeah, that just got confirmed. So we'll be in Vermont this year. As you may recall, we rotate around the Basin or Heritage area in this case every year. So we were in the Plattsburgh area last September, and we're going to be in the Burlington area this September, 21st, 22nd. I literally just had it up a moment ago. Where are we? The 22nd and 23rd of September will be in the Burlington area. So stay tuned for a save the date probably from Jim Bringen on that.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sure.
I'll fence that weekend.
It is actually, you're right in that usually it is a Sunday and Monday. This year, I don't recall the actual days of the week, but we're doing it midweek this year to take advantage of availability for UVM's new research vessel, the Marcel Melosira. That will be part of the tours that we often do. So that I don't know which days of the week it is, but it will not be on a Sunday as it has been in the past.
Anybody else with any big announcements to make or upcoming events? Erin, any last comments from you?
Just so our next meeting of this group will be April 27th. So I'll be following up with more meeting information as we get that set up.
Okay, great. Well, I guess thanks to everybody for joining us today, and look forward to meeting next week or next month, and then we will continue our regular business at that point. You're welcome.
Great. Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks all.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thanks all.
Nice to see you all.
Hey, Erin.